Hey, hey, hey. Time for an out of this world story from rSpace. Some people spend their lives looking for love. Others look for validation. And then there are people like Carrie, who somehow decide the best place to find it is in someone else's bed on someone else's dime. Today on rSpace, chasing the dream, but it's more like a nightmare. Cheating wife snuck her young affair partner on the company's payroll. I exposed her, destroyed her career, and abandoned her. My wife has been cheating on me with a younger man, and she thought that she was smart enough for it to stay hidden forever. For the most part, she did manage to keep things under wraps, but at the end of the day, with enough time, she got sloppy like most cheaters do, and I was able to figure out exactly what was going on. I, 46 male, have been married to Carrie, 45 female, for 16 years. We had our 2 children relatively soon after getting married, so the younger one is 14. I felt like I was living my dream because I had my family set up and it seemed like I had a loving wife and 2 great kids. What I've learned now is that things can change a lot faster than you hope for them to, and not always for the better. It all started because I saw a message come in on her phone and it was from a contact saved as consultant. I could tell that the message wasn't written very professionally. For full context, she works at a larger company and they sometimes hire consultants to help on certain projects. If not for the fact that, "Have you gotten back home?" doesn't sound like something a consultant should say, I wouldn't have had any kind of suspicion if I saw that contact on her phone. I didn't say anything about it because generally I'm non-confrontational, and she knows that. It's something that I've tried to work on for many years, but I've done a really poor job at that. I can confront when it is necessary though, and I decided that, in this case, I would make sure I knew exactly what was going on before I made any kind of move on her. That was what I did. When I got the chance to grab her phone, I went through her messages and I was able to very easily see her messages with the supposed consultant. The first thing that I realized from the moment I opened the chat was that they weren't talking in a fashion that would ever be appropriate for people with a working relationship. When I kept reading, I found out that the guy's name was Finn, and they didn't have anything to say about work, besides the times when she'd mentioned how busy work was for her. The more I read, the more that I saw that they spent a lot of time together. She was in pictures that the 2 of them had taken together, and just from looking at the pictures and the way they'd have their faces against each other, they were not those people who had a working relationship. It was clear that she was cheating on me with him, even though at that point, I was yet to see proof of it. That did eventually come later, once I had the chance to read through the entirety of their conversations. I couldn't do it all at once because there was simply too much for me to read, and I couldn't figure out how to export everything. I discovered that the 2 of them had slept with one another, and it was confirmed in the texts. I don't know how many times it had happened, but there were at least 3 instances that I could point to. In just over a year of them talking to one another, they didn't talk to each other every day, but when they did, especially when they started talking, there was a whole lot of flirting. It had calmed down with the more recent messages, but it was still clear that they were still in an inappropriate relationship. The cheating was bad enough, but when I realized that the man was being financially rewarded for sleeping with her, I knew that I hadn't known that person I was married to at all. The reason why she had saved his name like that was because that was the cover she had created for him so that he'd be able to enjoy some perks of the company she worked at, including being paid on a monthly basis, while doing nothing. I knew this because he had complained one month about having not seen the payment the way he should have. She gave some explanation as to how the original contract had expired and she had to get it approved again. She sent a screenshot from some payroll application which had his full name, his job role as a consultant, and the fact that the company was paying the guy over $5,000 a month. I'm sure they had no idea of it. I took screenshots and pictures of everything that I could, and in those moments, I tried to be calculated and smart, but honestly, the entire thing just broke me. I had built a family from the ground up, and we had done our best to raise children with the right ideals, only for me to find out that my wife didn't even have the right ideals in the first place. It was depressing, but it was also infuriating, because I realized that I had been taken for a fool. I even started to worry about my children, and whether they were even mine in the first place. Both of them look a lot like me, so that was something of a relief. But it was enough for me to feel entirely assuaged. My kids are also old enough that if I take them for a paternity test, they'll know exactly what is going on. Since I'm going to divorce her anyway, I'll wait for the point where the court will mandate it instead. I really don't want to have to deal with the anxiety and potential heartbreak of a paternity test right now. Instead, I just want to focus on making sure that I get the divorce papers ready and that I can go separate ways with her. I don't want anything to do with that woman. And, of course, with the evidence that I have, I will be sure to let her company know exactly what is going on. Update 1. Confronting a cheating partner is a lot messier than I ever would have expected, but I think that I handled it very well. I made sure that the very first thing I did was to contact a divorce lawyer as soon as I could. I went to his office, showed him the evidence that I had, and he reached the same conclusions that I had. Not only had she been cheating on me with this guy for quite some time, but she had also been using her position in the company to get him paid. There wasn't anything that we could legally do about the second part, but we would certainly be able to pull in a report to the company so they could take it from there. He let me know that the papers would be ready to be served in a few days, so I had to put up with Carrie for those days, even though all the love that I had once for her had turned into hate. Honestly, I truly hated her, and I still do, because you don't put your whole life into making something work with someone, have it fall apart, and still expect to feel the same rosy way that you felt about them before. I mentioned it in my last post that I'm not much of a confrontational person, but I'll do it when there's no other option, and that was the situation that I found myself in with Carrie. I made sure that I could do it on a weekend when the kids weren't around because I knew that it was very likely going to get messy. As much as they were old enough to not hide in the closet with it their parents were fighting, it was just an unnecessary scene to have them have to sit through. I had arranged for the divorce papers to be delivered that same day. About an hour before that was scheduled, I told her that I wanted to speak to her. I went straight into it. I let her know that I was fully aware that she had cheated on me and she had an affair going on with a guy named Finn. From her body language, it was clear that there was nothing for her to deny, so I asked her what she wanted to say to it. The first thing she asked was how I had found out, but I told her that didn't matter, because it really didn't. I also didn't need her to know that I knew about the situation at her workplace either. We sat there in silence for a bit. I'm sure I was trying to figure out what to say. Eventually, she admitted to it. She said that it happened and it had been a big mistake. She hadn't intended for things to go far, but he came into her life at the wrong time, and it was very easy for him to end up being someone to make her feel young again. So that was the reason. She had started to feel old, having a midlife crisis or whatever. Then this young guy had come in, probably showing some degree of his interest, and she lacked the self-control it took to tell him that she had a husband, or he probably knew and simply didn't care about it. She said that she was sorry. She knew it was wrong, and she knew she had to stop, but she couldn't find a way to make it happen. She became used to it, and she figured it would fizzle out on its own at a point, but that didn't happen at the end of the day. However, she tried to assure me that it had never been more than just physical. He had never meant to her what I meant to her. We had built so much, and she never would have knowingly done something to destroy it. That's when I cut her off, because I pointed out that she had knowingly done something to destroy it. She couldn't act as if sleeping with him was something she wasn't aware of. She was fully aware of it, and as much as she had admitted to it, it didn't remove the fact that she had done those things and betrayed her family. I let her know that she had to know that. She started to cry, not the noisy kind, but just tears pouring down her face. I'm sure she realized what she had destroyed because of her selfishness. I needed to make sure that it was extremely clear to her, so I started to talk about the time we met and all the most notable moments that we had been through. I talked about the birth of our children. I talked about how I had supported her in the following some of her dreams. I really got her in her feels, and then let her know that all of that was gone because she had been selfish. It was all gone because of her, and I wasn't ever going to forgive her for it. I would move past it one day, but I wouldn't forgive her. That's when she started to beg me. She talked about how sorry she was, and she started to really beat herself down, as if that would make me feel any better about the situation. It went on for a long time, and she tried to make her case and make it seem like what she did wasn't that bad, but it didn't mean anything to me. It was while we were talking that the doorbell rang, and I let her know that it was for her. She's smart enough to know that she knew what I was doing. She started to beg even more, but I told her to answer the door first, and she did. When she came back, she was full on weeping, because in that moment, she realized how serious I was. She realized that I wasn't going to forgive the fact that she was cheating on me, and had been for several months. The only reason it was going to stop was because I had found out, and I wasn't going to be sympathetic to such a person. I told her that our conversation was officially over, and she followed me around the house for the next several hours, hoping that I would change my mind. That didn't happen, and eventually, I locked myself in a room until our kids came back. Even then, she resumed her pleading once they had gone to sleep, and I was in the living room. It irritated me so badly, because this is someone who made the conscious decision to cheat, knowing the consequences, and then when the consequences arrived, she absolutely refused to fully acknowledge them. She needed to know that what was happening was a consequence of her actions, and she wouldn't be able to plead her way out of the hole she had dug herself. Eventually, she accepted her fate and stopped following me around like a stray dog. The next thing that I did was find Finn. I knew his full name because of the payship thing that I had seen, and I found out that the guy was a master's student in the university in our town. The university happens to be very close to where Carrie works, so it started to make sense as to how they met and how they were able to cheat on me without me having a clue. It all made sense to me. I messaged him, and I wrote a long message to him, telling him that I knew about him and my wife's affair. I told him that he was part of the reason the 2 children were going to have to grow up in a broken home, and whether he cared or not, it was very important that he knew the truth and lived with it. I told him that he could have her if he wanted. I let him know that as a man, and one who clearly was smart enough to be studying a postgraduate course, he was a disappointment for what he had done. He messaged me back with what seemed to be a somewhat sincere response and apology, but to be completely honest, the last thing I wanted was to end up being pen pals with someone who had been sleeping with my wife. I knew that I was going to out him and Carrie anyway, and even though she'd be more culpable, it wouldn't be entirely devoid of consequences for him. For now, I'm just waiting for the actual divorce process to begin. I don't think I'm going to get full custody as I'd wished for, but to be fair, as much as I hate her, she's a good mother and the kids will be fine with her. Update 2. Telling your children that you're going to get divorced from their mother is never going to be easy. They're mature enough, and they handled it pretty well, but it still hit them pretty bad, because we had what should have been a perfect family. I blame Carrie for everything. She let me take the lead with telling them and what was going on, because she simply didn't have the balls to say what she had done. She had made a mistake letting me lead because, in a very matter-of-fact way, I let the kids know exactly what had happened. I didn't say it with any hate, but they needed to know, so I exposed her in a very neutral tone of voice. She looked at me, shocked, because she didn't expect me to tell them that. But what point is there in me not telling them? Why do I need to shield her to that extent? It looked like she wanted to yell at me for telling them that, after we had dismissed them, but she knew that she didn't have the moral currency to tell me that I shouldn't have, and I took advantage of that. That part was hard, but the actual divorce was hard too, because it made me realize how the person who I was trying to destroy had once been the love of my life. This was once someone who I would have done anything for, and at the end of the day, she turned into someone who I couldn't wait to get away from. It was so wild to me how quickly life can move. The divorce was pretty messy. She wanted 100% custody and then shifted to 70%, but there was really no basis for her wanting more time with the children than I had. I wasn't an absent father, I never hurt them, and I could cook and take care of the daily upkeep. In the end, we got it split down the middle, like pretty much everything else that we owned. Of course, as it might not surprise you, she got the house, because of course she did. Once all of that divorce business was over though, I realized that it was time for me to do my worst. I knew that the divorce itself was not going to be punishment enough, so I decided to go to her workplace. I submitted a report with all the evidence that I had that a supposed consultant working for them was being taken advantage of by Carrie. To them, it looked like a subordinate was being coerced into a sexual relationship. But I made sure that they dove deeper than that. I made sure that they saw that the consultant in question likely didn't do actual work at their company, yet it was collecting a pretty sensible salary every single month. It took quite some time, but eventually the investigation concluded, and it was exactly as I had thought. She had slid him into the company, apparently in cahoots with someone in the HR department, and the 2 of them were fired immediately. I found out because she called me right away. She told me that something had been uncovered at work, and she had been framed for it. She claimed that she had nothing to do with it, and when I kept trying to get details, she was very vague, just claiming that it had to do with money. I let her know that it was better to not mix business and pleasure, because when she did, it ended up the way it ended. She was silent over the phone, because she only just then realized that I had something to do with it. I let her know that I knew that she was basically a sugar mommy for Finn, but the only thing that she was using her company's money to pay him, not mine. I reiterated to her that she deserved everything that was happening to her. They were merely the consequences of her actions. "How could you? I get you're angry, but my livelihood?" That was what she said, and I let her know that her livelihood would have never been dragged into it if she hadn't dragged her affair partner into her livelihood. Again, consequences. She had a lot to say, but I didn't want to listen, so I just hung up on her. I can't block her because we need to communicate in regards to our children, but I'm not going to have any business with her outside of that. She said she wanted to talk the first time I went to pick up the kids, but I cut her off. I let her know that if it had anything to do with us, I didn't want to hear it, and she magically had nothing to say anymore. I'm glad I'm done with her. I'm happy to be free again. Maybe things will be better in the future. Crying, begging, trying to make it seem like a mistake, like she had no idea what she was doing. Please. That wasn't a mistake. This was a full-blown choice, made repeatedly, knowing exactly what the consequences were. She wanted pleasure. She wanted validation. and she wanted to feel young again. But she got caught, and now she's left with nothing but the rubble of her own making. The fact that she thought she could have it all, the thrill, the young guy, the money, and the facade of a stable marriage, just shows how laughably delusional she really is. She wanted to play house and play games, and now she's left with none of it. Have you ever known someone so desperate for validation that they destroy everything they claim to care about just to feel wanted? Let us know in the comments. Thank you for joining us today on rSpace. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. Until next time.